Hi, Marsha. I'm just checking in to see that you can hear me.
Yep, can
Oh,
hear.
okay, good. Baruch Hashem.
And you're recording, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
yeah. Oh, actually not. I hit it once, but I gotta hit it twice. Okay, now I'm recording. Thank you. Okay, so although I kind of had in my mind that we would go further this week, but I'm not. Part of it is because it happens to be that this kapitel is a long time favorite kapitel of mine. It's like I always say that there are everybody has kapitlach in Sefer Tehillim that speak to them. And it happens to be that this kapitel is a very, very long time favorite of mine. And therefore it's hard for me to just walk past it without spending some time on certain psukim over here. So I want to go to Pasuk Dalid, where David HaMelech says, Drachecha, second, yeah, that's good, okay. Drachecha Hashem Haidieni, your ways, Hashem. Hashem, please let me know your ways. Archaisecha, your pathways, Lamdeni, you should teach me. Okay, very nice pasuk. What precisely is it that David HaMelech is asking of Hashem? What does it mean? Drachecha Hashem Haidieni. Hashem, let me know your ways. And whatever it does mean, it seems that David HaMelech is mentioning two different things. There's Drachecha, there's your ways, and then there's Archaisecha, your pathways. It's like I always say, there's a temptation to look at Tehillim and say that David HaMelech is being very poetic. But that is certainly not the case. Every word is a word of Torah Shebiksav. Every word over here is imbued with layers and layers of Ruach HaKodesh. And not a single word is for naught. Nothing was written over here just to be poetic. So what are drachim, what are archos, what are ways, what are paths? And precisely what is David HaMelech asking? Now, as far as what David HaMelech is asking, we could say that David HaMelech is taking a page out of Moshe Rabbeinu's book. Because Moshe Rabbeinu also said to the Rebbeinu Shalom in Parshas Kisisa, after the calamity of the Egel, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Va'ata, and now imna matzasi chen be'einecha, if I have found favor in your eyes, haidieni na es derachecha, you should let me know your ways, ve'edacha, so that I should know you. And why am I asking this? Laman emtza chen be'einecha, so that I should find favor in your eyes, ure'ei ki amcha hagoy hazeh. Okay, so we have over here both Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, who ask Hashem in slightly different words, where they ask that Hashem should let them know, His ways. So we have to understand what it is that Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech are both asking. They're asking for something, and there's a reason why they're asking for it. So what exactly is it all about? Just saw somebody tried to join, and I thought I let them in. 1 second. Participants. That's better. Okay, fine. So what exactly is it that Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech were asking for? So, I think the first thing that we have to understand, and again, this is something that we did mention last week, but I want to go into it in a little bit greater depth. I mentioned last week the Mesilas Yesharim. The Mesilas Yesharim mentions the pasuk, Va'ato Yisrael, and now Klal Yisrael, Ma Hashem Elokecha Shel Me'imach. What is it that Hashem asks of you? Ki im liyira es Hashem Elokecha, just that you should fear Hashem your God, Laleches b'chol derachav, and you should go in all of His ways. And the Ramchal in the Mesilas Yesharim says, what does that mean? What does it mean that we should go in Hashem's ways? And he says, Hahalicha b'drachav, when we speak about going in Hashem's ways, koilel, this includes kol inyan yosher hamidos v'tikunam, the entire concept of one straightening out his midos, his character traits, v'tikunam, and improving them. And this is what the Chazal tell us, that we have an obligation, mahu rachum, that the same way that the Rebbeinu Shalom is a rachum, he's merciful, af HaTorah, you also have to arouse in yourself rachmanus, you have to turn yourself into a merciful person. Mahu chanun, the Rebbeinu Shalom is gracious, he gives for no reason, he gives people things even when they don't deserve it. You also have to be a chanun. So what the Chazal tell us is that when this pasuk says lo leches b'chol drachav, when the pasuk says that we have an obligation to go in the ways of Hashem, that means that our purpose in this world, our tafkid in life, what we are supposed to strive for, is we are supposed to make ourselves as similar as possible to the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're supposed to look at the way the Rebbeinu Shalom acts. We're supposed to look at the way the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, comports himself. And we are supposed to strive to have those same character traits and to act in the same way. That's our obligation in this world. That's what we have to strive for. In the light of that, we can understand how Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech both asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, Hodieni na es drachecha, let me know your ways. I want to know your ways so that I could better emulate them. Not only that, I find it instructive to see when Moshe Rabbeinu asked, Hodieni na es drachecha. Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, Hodieni na es drachecha, when he was going through a particularly rough crisis. It was right after the Egel. Now, right after the Chet of the Egel, that was a time that Moshe Rabbeinu had a great struggle. Moshe Rabbeinu had to know how is he supposed to comport himself in relation to Klal Yisrael. How is he supposed to act? Is he supposed to be kind and forgiving to Klal Yisrael? Is he supposed to be understanding of Klal Yisrael? Is he supposed to be angry with Klal Yisrael? How much is he supposed to daven for Klal Yisrael? How much is he supposed to intercede on behalf of Klal Yisrael? These were major decisions that Moshe Rabbeinu had to make. And Moshe Rabbeinu understood that there's only one right way to make those decisions. And that is, what would the Rebbeinu Shalom do? What is the perspective of the Torah HaKdosha? What would the Torah HaKdosha tell me to do? So Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hodieni na es drachecha, let me know your ways. The analogy that I have, something that perhaps makes it easier for us to comprehend. Imagine a young fellow who wants to learn a trade, and he becomes apprenticed to a master craftsman. I mean, I just had a silly one. I have an auto mechanic that I've been using for decades. I've been using the same mechanic for now over 30 years. An Italian fellow, and he's older than I am. He's already way past retirement age, but he keeps on trucking, no pun intended. And he's clearly a master of his craft. He happens to be a very, very smart fellow, and he's been at this for a very, very long time. And I just had an experience with him where he now has a shop manager who's quite a bit younger than he is, and a customer came in with a late model car, happens to be a Toyota, so it's a car that has a sterling reputation, and this fellow just bought this car. It's a late model, low mileage used car, and it has a reputation of being a wonderful vehicle, a very high quality vehicle. And he brought it in, and he's having a little bit of an issue. So the mechanic, my friend, he walked by, took one peek, and he said, oh, it's a head gasket. A head gasket on that truck, it's a pickup truck, a head gasket on that truck is a $3,500 job. The young mechanic who was working on the truck looked at him like, what? A head gasket? I mean, on a 2015, I think it was a Toyota Tundra with 30,000 miles, you're going to tell me that it's a head gasket? And you're going to make that diagnosis without just with a sideways glance under the hood? Can't be. So him and some of his peers decided it was something else, a small thing. They went ahead, they fixed it, they gave it back to the customer. Sure enough, the customer was back in the shop a week later with a new problem. The owner of the shop walks by, he smiles. He says, did you accept yet that it's a bum head gasket? The young fellows over there still didn't want to agree that it was a head gasket. So they started looking into this, looking into that. Then one of them said, look, the old man, the boss, he's not going to accept anything we say at this point unless we try to see is the head gasket okay. So they did a compression test on the engine. They actually put a camera into one of the pistons. They took a look. Sure enough, it was a head gasket. And the guy's in for a $3,500 head gasket repair. And when they opened up the engine, they took off the top of the engine to take a look. Sure enough, they found that the head gasket was a defective head gasket. There was actually a small piece of the gasket. Looks like it was almost cut or missing. So it was a defective gasket. I looked at the owner of the shop. I said, how did you know? So he said, it's not that I'm a genius. It's just that I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And you get a good nose after a while. So a smart apprentice in that shop looks at the boss, and if this is what he wants to do with his life, if he wants to be a highly qualified auto mechanic, and he wants to one day own his own shop and earn a sterling reputation, if he's smart, he glues himself to somebody like that. And lahavdil, he says, Haydieni nas drachecha. He says, teach me the tricks of the trade. I'm going to stick myself to you, and I want to know how you do it every step of the way. Our tafkid in life is spelled out in this pasuk. Our purpose in life is spelled out in this pasuk that the Mesulas Yesharim brings down. Loleches b'chol derachav. That's our purpose. Our task in this life is to take the imperfect being that we are, to take ourselves with all of our imperfections. Hashem made every single one of us with a myriad of imperfections. Our job is to take ourselves, to take our strengths, to take our weaknesses, and to mold ourselves in the Tzelem Elokim. We are supposed to pattern ourselves after our Creator. We're supposed to look to Him, and we're supposed to say, Haydieni na es drachecha. Let me learn. Let me see your ways. Let me see how you do things. And that's the way I want to do them. I want to do what you would do. Now that's not always easy. Not only is it not always easy to learn, but it's not easy to want to learn. A person has to be willing to subjugate himself. A person has to be willing to subjugate the way he wants to react to things, and to subjugate his natural tendencies and the way he would think of something. And he has to say, wait, what would the Torah want? What would the Torah say? What would Hashem say I should do in this situation? And he should change himself and say, that's not what I would have thought. I would have thought that we have to do something else. But I see that the Rabbeinu Shalom would do this. The Torah would say we should do that. That's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to remake myself in the ways of the Torah. Now, there's a beautiful Malbim over here. I mentioned that the pasuk says two different things. David HaMelech mentions drachecha, Hashem should let me know his ways, and archesecha, his paths. Says the Malbim, a derech, a way, is a main road. A way is like a highway. You have a highway, you have the Garden State Parkway. The Garden State Parkway, more or less, is a north-south running road. If somebody would ask you, where does the Garden State Parkway go? So if somebody would stop me on the street and ask me, where does the Garden State Parkway go? I would tell him, well, it starts in New Jersey way up north in the Ramapo area where the Garden State Parkway hits the New York State Thruway. So it starts all the way up north, and it goes all the way down south, all the way to Cape May, to the tip of New Jersey at the Atlantic Ocean. That's where the Garden State Parkway goes. Okay, now maybe this fellow wants to go to Edison. He wants to go to Highland Park. Does the Garden State Parkway go to Highland Park? Well, the Garden State Parkway meanders its way down, and it passes Route 27, it passes Route 1, and if you want, you could get off at 131, I think it is, 130, 131. You could get off, and you could take the Route 1, and you could take Route 1 over into Edison. If you want, you can get off two exits earlier. You could get off by Route 27, and you could wind your way up Route 27. You can get to Edison that way. Very nice. Does the Garden State Parkway go to Piscataway? Well, yeah. If you go a little further south, you could get off at the Highland Park Bound Brook exit. You could pick up River Road, and you could cut through Piscataway. So yes, the Garden State Parkway does go to Edison. It does go to Piscataway. It does go to Denellen. It does go to whatever it's called, the medical center. Just slipped my... No. Dr. Atlas. Morristown. You could work your way to Morristown. There's 100 communities in New Jersey that the Garden State Parkway can get you to. But you see, if you want to get to one of those communities, you have to get off at an exit. You have to get off at an exit, and now you have to take a secondary road. If you take the primary road will terminate south, it will terminate at Cape May, and north, it will terminate at Nanuet. But if you take the secondary roads, you could get to many other different places. Says the Malbim, Drachecha, the derech, that's the highway. That's the view from 30,000 feet. There's one level at which you want to know the Ribbono Shel Olam's drachecha. What are the Ribbono Shel Olam's ways? Well, one of the Ribbono Shel Olam's ways, the Chazal tell us, is Mahu Rachum, just like he's merciful, Af ata Rachum. So too you should be merciful. Okay, so now I know that the Ribbono Shel Olam is merciful. All right, so now let me ask you a question. If somebody goes ahead and murders somebody, chas v'chalila, somebody goes ahead and kills somebody, what should we do with him? Well, God is merciful. So certainly we shouldn't have capital punishment. Maybe we should lock him up. Maybe we shouldn't even lock him up for life. Maybe we should rehabilitate him. Maybe we should do whatever we can to get him back into mainstream society. After all, we have to be merciful. Okay, the Ribbono Shel Olam is merciful. Maybe we should all become vegans because we have to be merciful on those poor cows. You have a very nice cow over there munching on his grass, having a grand old time, and now you want to go ahead and slaughter him so that you could eat a steak? What kind of mercy is that? We should be merciful. You have to know how you're supposed to apply mercy. It's very nice to say that on a high level, the Ribbono Shel Olam is merciful. That's true. But there are also details. There are details in the Ribbono Shel Olam's mercy. You have to know how to apply the Ribbono Shel Olam's mercy. Says David HaMelech, Drachecha Hashem Haidieni. Let me know in broad strokes. Let me know your drachim. Let me know the overarching principles. Yes, the Ribbono Shel Olam is a rachum. That's an overarching principle. That's on a very high level, in a very broad way. The Rebbeinu Shalom is merciful. But also, Archaisecha, your pathways, the secondary roads, the deviations from the rules, the exceptions, the details, the pratim that go ahead and govern how you apply mercy. How do you apply din? We said that there's din and there's rachmanus. There's judgment. We have different names of Hashem. There's the Shem of Havaya that it connotes the merciful God, but there's also Elokim, Elokeinu, that connotes the God of judgment. So God has different ways of handling different situations. That's in order to understand what to do when. And it could be that David HaMelech is asking this in his capacity as a king. He has to know how to rule the nation, how he should be noyeg with the people. Then there's drachim and there's archos. There are highways, there are main roads, and then there are pathways. Then there are details. The question for us is, how do we apply this to us, to ourselves? What do we say to the Rebbeinu Shalom? We have over here two of the greatest of the greats of our history, Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, who both turned to the Rebbeinu Shalom and said in very similar words, Haydieni nas drachecha, let me know your derech. Or over here, David HaMelech, Drachecha Hashem Haydieni, Archaisecha Lamdeni. What do we say to the Rebbeinu Shalom? Could we come to the Rebbeinu Shalom and make the same request? Or do you have to be a Moshe Rabbeinu or a David HaMelech to make such a request? The answer, I believe, is that we have to make the same request because we have the same obligation. It's just that our obligation is at a lower level. David HaMelech, Moshe Rabbeinu, they had to lead the people. They had to know how to be the leader. They had to know how to be the one to make all sorts of decisions that would affect millions of people. We perhaps don't have that responsibility, even though my Rebbe, Reb Ruven Zolazai Gesund Stark, always says from the Pasuk that you have to be a Mamleches Kaihanim V'Goy Kadosh. The Rebbeinu Shalom speaks about Klal Yisrael and says that you will be a Mamleches Kaihanim. You will be a kingdom of priests. Kaihanim, Rashi says in that Pasuk, doesn't mean that we're all supposed to be Kaihanim. We're certainly not all Kaihanim. Many of us are Yisraelim. The majority of us are not Kaihanim. Says Rashi, Kaihanim in the context of that pasuk means leaders. We all, every one of us, every member of Klal Yisrael is both expected to be a leader if the time comes that he has to be a leader. Every one of us also factually is a leader. Because even if we're not leading the whole nation, we're leading our family, we're leading our friends, we're leading our co-workers, we're all teachers. We all have effects on the people around us. So to some extent, we are all leaders. We all have to be willing to turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And we all have to say, Hoidieni na es drachecha. Every one of us has to realize that the way we react to things in life has to be through the eyes of Torah. Everything. So, for example, if today you are at work, or wherever you are on the bus, you're on the train, and somebody makes a comment about the end of the Trump presidency and the beginning of the Biden presidency, and they want to know what you think about it. There's different ways to answer that question. If you are a registered Republican with conservative leanings, you might decide to look at it and say, oh, I think this is terrible. I don't know what's going to be. What's going to happen with this policy? What's going to happen with that policy? I see that already on the first day, Biden is already overturning executive orders that Trump made, and what's going to happen and this and that. That's the way any American might look at it. But you're not any American. You're a Frum Yid. How does a Frum Yid look at it? Especially if it's a Frum Yid that's asking you the question. If it's a Frum Yid that's asking you the question, you might respond by giving a chuckle and by saying, Biden is in for a great surprise. Leiv malachim v'sarim b'yad Hashem. We know that the hearts and the minds of leaders, of kings, are all in the hands of the Ribbono Shel Olam. So, President Biden could decide whatever he wants. He could decide he's doing this, he's going to decide he's doing that. He's going to do precisely what the Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides that he's going to do. That's what he's going to do. Rav Moshe Zatzal used to say, even on a higher level, Rav Moshe used to say, Leiv Malachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem. I'm forgetting in my mind exactly what the diak and the pasuk that he made was. But he used to say that the Ribbono Shel Olam is the Melech Malchei HaMelachim. He's not only the Melech over the Melachim. It's not only that the one who's the king, Leiv Melachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem, that his heart is in the hands of Hashem. The Ribbono Shel Olam is the Melech Malchei HaMelachim. He's also the Melech over the ones that are Mamlich the Melachim. Every voter that went into the voting booth to vote, they make a whole big deal over here. Was the election an honest election? Or was the election thrown? Or was the election stolen? Forget that. They talk about hackers and did they get into the voting machines and the voting computers. The Ribbono Shel Olam is in the heart of every person that went into every voting booth and pulled the lever in every voting booth in the nation. So you want to know if it was hacked? It was hacked by the Ribbono Shel Olam. It was hacked by God. Whatever God wanted, whoever God wanted to win, that's the amount of votes that were cast for that individual. So does it make a critical difference to us whether it's Donald Trump that's in the White House or it's Joe Biden that's in the White House? The Ribbono Shel Olam is in Shamayim. The Ribbono Shel Olam is Malay Chala Aretz Kevaydai. The Ribbono Shel Olam is in the White House. The Ribbono Shel Olam is in the U.S. Capitol. The Ribbono Shel Olam is in the Kremlin. The Ribbono Shel Olam is, I don't know what they call it in Iran, where Yabba Dabba Doo is in his wherever his office is, and the Ribbono Shel Olam is in Syria, and the Ribbono Shel Olam is in Saudi Arabia, and the Ribbono Shel Olam is in Russia. The Ribbono Shel Olam is everywhere. I like to tell people, they talk about world events, and they say, what could I do? What can I do? I'm looking at everything that's happening on the world stage. What can I do? How can I affect what's going on in China? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Every one of us that's listening to this shir has more effect on what goes on in China, on what goes on in Russia, on what goes on in Egypt, on what goes on in Eretz Yisrael, on what goes on in the United States than anybody else does. And I mean that. 1 second. That was my chumash. What do I mean by that? It's very simple. Every one of us has a personal one-on-one meeting with the Ribbono Shel Olam 3 times a day. Every one of us davens Shacharis, davens Mincha, davens Ma'ariv. Every one of those times we could turn to the Ribbono Shel Olam and we could speak to the Ribbono Shel Olam. They don't speak to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Who do they speak to? Yeah, so somebody will say, oh, he's very influential. He's personal friends with the Speaker of the House. He's personal friends with the Senate Majority Leader. He's personal friends with the governor. He's personal friends with the mayor. Big deal. I never spoke to any one of them. I probably will never speak to any one of them. But I speak to the Ribbono Shel Olam. I speak to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And the Ribbono Shel Olam pulls the strings on every single one of these individuals. So big deal. Big deal. I have greater effect, or I have the ability at least, to have greater effect on anything that's going on anywhere in the world than any of these people do. I have the opportunity to have a greater effect on what goes on the world stage than the President of the United States. Even if it's Joe Biden and his Twitter account wasn't closed. So he still has a Twitter account. And he could tweet, and I don't tweet. I still have the opportunity to have a greater effect than he does. You know why? Because I pray to God 3 times a day. And if I have kavana, when I daven to the Ribbono Shel Olam, if I have kavana, and I asked the Rabbeinu Shalom, Re'ei Nava Anyenu V'Riva Rivenu. The Rabbeinu Shalom should fight our fights, Uga Aleinu Geula Shlema, and he should redeem us with a complete redemption, B'Mehera V'Yamenu, so that I could be mispal for that. And the Rabbeinu Shalom hears my tefillas. How the Rabbeinu Shalom would choose to respond, that's up to the Rabbeinu Shalom, like everything is. But I can daven to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and the Rabbeinu Shalom takes my tefillas into consideration. Now, how much is my personal tefillah worth? I can't tell you, but I'm a member of Klal Yisrael. I'm a Ben Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov. I'm a card-carrying member. I am a card-carrying member of Klal Yisrael. And therefore, the Rabbeinu Shalom accepts my tefillas. The Rabbeinu Shalom hears my tefillas. That I know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I can speak to the Rabbeinu Shalom on any topic at all. And I have the opportunity to have that effect. But you see, this is all if you look at things from the perspective of the Torah HaKadoshah. But that's what we're obligated to do. What we're obligated to do is Hodieni Nas Drachecha. That's what we're obligated to do. What we're obligated to do is to recognize that we want to know the Rabbeinu Shalom's ways because we want to live in the Rabbeinu Shalom's ways. We want to emulate the Rabbeinu Shalom's ways. How should somebody react when somebody comes to ask him for help? How would the Rabbeinu Shalom react? I always say over the story, I must have said it, it would resonate with you, with this Olam. A great teaching moment for me from Reb David Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Vracha was when Reb Mechel first came to me and asked me if I would daven in the shtibel on Rosh Hashanah. I was saying the Daf Yomi Shir then in the shtibel. I wasn't really davening in the shtibel much originally. And Reb Mechel came to me, he said he has a problem. He blows shofar, but if he's going to blow shofar, he needs a makri. He needs somebody who's going to call out, Tkiyah Shvarim, True Tkiyah. He said he didn't have anybody to be a makri. The makri is supposed to know Hilchah Shofar. He didn't have anybody to be a makri. He had another problem. Certain ones of the Tkiyahs were hard for him to blow. So he came to me, he asked me, would I daven in the shtibel on Rosh Hashanah, and would I blow shofar, and would I be the makri? We'll split the blowing of shofar. At that point in time, I had been davening in the Aguda, either that or going to Staten Island and davening by the yeshiva. Very, very different picture. I daven Ashkenaz, the shtibel daven. I mean, the truth is, no, I shouldn't say that. I personally daven Sfarad, but I was used to davening with a Nusach Ashkenaz minyan. I was used to a very yeshivish davening, more of a Litvish yeshivish davening. This was going to be more of a Chassidish davening. I was used to davening in a much larger olam. This was going to be a much smaller olam. Very, very different picture. It happens to be that I was by Reb David. I had to speak to Reb David about something. So I said, no, I'm here. I'll ask the Yeshiva what the Yeshiva thinks. And I gave the whole picture over to Reb David. And I asked him, I said, what should I do? So he gave me that big smile of his. And he said, Sadavar Pashat, that you should go daven in the shtibel. So I said, okay, fine. If that's what the Yeshiva says, that's what I'm going to do. But I asked him, I said, I'm just curious. The Yeshiva is saying that it's such a davar pashut. It's obvious that that's what I should do. So I asked him, why is it so obvious? Why is it a davar pashut? So he smiled at me and he said, a Yid is asking you for help. If a Yid asks you for help, you have to help. That was the davar pashut. So here you see, what does it mean? Drachecha Hashem Hodieni. Drachecha Hashem Hodieni is, at that moment, speaking to Reb David, I learned one of the drachim of the Torah HaKadoshah. I learned one of the ways of Hashem. One of the ways of Hashem is, if a Yid asks you for help, it's a davar pashut that you have to help. Even if you think that you have very spiritually uplifting reasons why maybe not. You think maybe you should daven Rosh Hashanah, Yom Adin. You should daven in the type of minyan that you're used to. You should daven with a bigger tzibur. No, a yid needs help. If a yid needs help, you have to help. And this, Rabbi Sai, also leads me to the next point, which is, we don't have the opportunity to have the Nevius, to have that clear conversation with the Ribbono Shel Olam that a Moshe Rabbeinu or a David HaMelech had, to turn to the Ribbono Shel Olam and say, Ribbono Shel Olam, Drachecha Hashem Hodieni. So how are we to learn the ways of Hashem? And the answer is, the way we learn the ways of Hashem is that we have to apprentice ourselves to a master craftsman. The same way the auto mechanic who wants to become a great auto mechanic has to apprentice himself to a master in the trade. Somebody who wants to learn how to repair jewelry and repair watches has to tie himself to a master of the trade who's been doing it for decades and sit and learn. What do? We have to apprentice ourselves to Rabbeim and to Rabbanim. We have to learn from them. Every single one of us needs a Rebbe. Every single one of us needs a Rav and a Rebbe that we're attached to, who we can learn. How do we react to things? How does the Torah want us to act? How does the Torah want us to react? How does the Torah want us to comport ourselves? And we have to learn from the Torah. The Torah is the guidebook. It's not by accident that over here, David HaMelech says, Archaisecha lamdeni, teach me your pathways. And in Kapitel Kuf Yud Tes, David HaMelech says, Baruch atah Hashem lamdeni chukecha. You taught me your chukim. You taught me your laws. It's in the Torah HaKdosha that we learn the Archais Hashem. We learn the pathways of Hashem. We learn from learning Torah. How do we apply the midos of Hashem? From learning the Torah HaKdosha, we learn how the Torah HaKdosha looks at life and how we're supposed to look at life. I'll give you another very simple, very broad manifestation. It's not mine. I forget who it was that made the point. Maybe Reb Noach Weinberg. I'm not sure. He said, there's a great difference between Western Greek philosophy in government and the philosophy of the Torah HaKdosha. We all know, and the politicians love to parrot it, even if they only pay it lip service. We love to say that the people have inalienable rights, and the Constitution is a document that protects people's rights, so that it becomes, in Western philosophy, we call this a democracy. That comes from a Greek word, that people have rights. And I am guaranteed certain rights. And the law protects my rights. And somebody else is not allowed to infringe upon my rights. He's not allowed to do anything that challenges my rights. I have rights. So the Constitution confers rights upon you. The Torah HaKdosha does not confer rights upon you. The Torah HaKdosha confers obligations upon you. The Torah HaKdosha tells you that you are obligated not to infringe upon somebody else's rights. But the Torah HaKdosha doesn't say you have a right and your right has to be protected. The Torah HaKdosha says you have an obligation. You, as a human being, that the Ribbono Shel Olam created, and the Ribbono Shel Olam imbued you with knowledge and self-awareness and abilities and all sorts of abilities and talents and everything else. You have obligations. That's what you have. You have obligations. You have obligations to make sure that you don't infringe upon somebody else. You have an obligation to serve Hashem. You have an obligation to use your talents and your God-given abilities in order to increase Kvod Shamayim, in order to increase the honor of heaven. Those are obligations that you have. It's not that you have rights, it's that you have obligations. There's a story in Navi. Navos. Navos lived in the time of Achav and Izevel. Navos met a bad end. Navos had the misfortune to own a piece of land that was adjacent to a vineyard, I believe it was, that belonged to Achav. And Achav wanted that piece of land. But Navos wasn't selling. When Izevel, the Mirshas, the evil Izevel, Achav's queen, found out that this fellow Navos was giving the king grief because he refused to sell his piece of land, she had Navos framed, and she had Navos put to death. The Chazal wonder what it was that Navos did that made him deserving of death. And Chazal say that Navos had a beautiful voice. And he failed to use his voice, I don't know if it was on one occasion or on more than one occasion, he failed to use his beautiful voice, l'chvod shamayim. Since he wasn't using the God-given talents that he had to be marbe kvod shamayim, apparently there was no purpose for him to be on this world anymore. And therefore he met a bad end. The Ribbono Shel Olam gives us abilities. The Ribbono Shel Olam gives us talents. The Ribbono Shel Olam gives us kaiches. We have an obligation to use those kaiches l'chvod shamayim. But this is always the question that we have to be asking. The question that we always have to be asking is Drachecha Hashem Hoidieni Archeisecha Lamdeni. We have to be constantly searching, constantly striving, constantly asking ourselves, how do we learn the ways of Hashem? How do we learn to look at everything and react to everything the way the Torah wants us to? That's what we need to learn. And the only way we could learn it is by learning Torah and by learning from Rabbeim. There is no other way to learn this. There's no other shortcut. There's no way to learn the ways of Hashem. You're not going to learn it by going ahead and going on YouTube and finding a YouTube video like you can any other skill. The only way to learn this is by learning Torah and by attaching yourself to Rabbeim and to Rabbanim. There's no shortcuts. And by doing that, we can slowly but surely learn how to have a Torah-dika perspective and a Torah-dika eye. Going a little further in this perek, in Pasuk Zayin, David HaMelech says, Chatois nu'urai, the sins of my youth, upishai, and my transgressions. A pesha is a more stringent type of sin than a chatos. Chatois nu'urai, those are the sins of my youth, things that I did when I didn't know better. Pshai, a pesha, is a merid, is a rebellion. A pesha is something that I did know better. I knew what the Ribbono Shel Olam wanted. But I was merid, I rebelled. I did what the Ribbono Shel Olam would not want me to do. David HaMelech asks on both of these. The Chatois, the Urai, the sins of his youth, Upshai, and his transgressions. Al Tizkar. He asks the Ribbono Shel Olam, don't remember them. Kechastecha, in accordance with your kindness, Zacharli Ata, remember me now. Remember who I am now. Those things that I did in the past, forget them. It's an interesting dilemma. You see, up in Shamayim, there's a scorecard. Up in Shamayim, there's a video camera. You know, I always say, Chazal, in Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah says, a person should always remember what's above him. Ayin ra. There's an eye that sees. V'oizen shamas. And there's an ear that hears. V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavin. And all of your deeds are written down in a book. Chazal said that before they ever saw a video camera. They said that before they ever saw a still camera. We know video cameras. I'm speaking on one right now. One of the great debates of our day is this question of loss of privacy. Do you realize if you own a smartphone, the truth is any cell phone, not only a smartphone, if you own a cell phone and you carry that cell phone in your pocket or in your purse, wherever you go, there is a record of everywhere that you have been, every minute of the day. And that record eventually could be viewed by anybody who feels that they have a need to view it. The government decides at any point in time that they want to know where you were on January 20th, 2021 at 8:48 p.m., they can know. They know exactly how to find out. They subpoena the information, and right away they know where you were. Now you'll say, wait a second, but my phone is off. Baloney, your phone is off. Your phone is not off. If I call you right now, your phone is going to ring. How is your phone going to ring? Your phone is going to ring because my phone is going to reach out to the nearest cell tower, and that call is going to go out, and it's going to go to the cell tower that you're closest to, which knows where you are, because that cell tower is constantly checking in with your phone. Your phone is constantly communicating to the cell tower saying, here I am. If you need me, I'm right here. And when I call, the cell tower is contacting your call, your phone. And the cell tower knows how far from you it is. And so to another two cell phones. So they triangulate. And they know where you are. Now, in the olden days, that record vanished very quickly because memory was expensive. Computer memory was expensive. Now computer memory is dirt cheap. So hey, why should we dump it? It's like me. I'm going ahead and I'm recording this. Right now I'm making 1, 2, 3. There are 3 recordings going on. And I just noticed, by the way, that my audio recorder is no longer recording because it says card full. But it doesn't matter because I'm going to be able to put this on Lucky Radio anyway, because Zoom is making a recording, YouTube is making a recording, and I'm running a software package called OBS, and OBS is making a recording. So I'll have to take one of the video recordings, I'll have to split the audio off of the video, and boom, I have it. Now, years ago, I would dump all of these eventually. I would save one. Now, there's really no pressing reason to dump it because memory is cheap. If I would have followed my intuition and I would have dumped my card and my recorder today, I wouldn't have an extra 20 minutes of work tonight. But I didn't. I let it get full. But all of these records of everywhere where you are and everywhere where you've been, they don't get erased anymore. They keep them. And they keep them because they know that they're valuable. And the government likes the fact that they're being kept because the government knows that it can always check up on its citizenry. And if they ever have a need to, they can find out where you are. And they like that idea. That doesn't bother them. So they encourage the keeping of the information. Chazal didn't know any of this. And yet Chazal said, know what's above you in Shamayim. Ayin Ra, there's an eye that watches. And everywhere you've been and everything that you have done is recorded up in Shamayim. Now here's the great dilemma. Here's the great problem. In Shamayim they remember everything. But I don't. I don't know everything that I've did since I'm a 13-year-old anymore. There's thousands of things that I did that I don't remember. Now, the problem is, if everything that I did is recorded, then if there are things that I did that were not right, and I have not rectified them with tshuva, what do I do? Mali liyom adin. What do I do for the Yom Adin Ayim V'Naira? What do I do when I come upstairs and they take out that recording and they say, look what you did when you were 16? You remember that piece of Lashon Hara that you spoke? No, actually, I don't. Well, guess what? You never did tshuva for it. Well, what am I supposed to do? I lived another X amount of decades, but I forgot about it. So yes, I never rectified it with tshuva, but what do I do now? Now I have a whole ledger sheet of hundreds, thousands of things that they remember. The Rebbeinu Shalom remembers it. But I don't remember it. So how do we do tshuva? Ma lanu liyom adin. And that's why I think David HaMelech uses the lashon that he uses. David HaMelech does not say chatois neurai upisha'ai techaper. He doesn't ask the Rebbeinu Shalom, forgive me for the sins of my youth. Forgive me for the transgressions of my youth. No. Forgive you? You want to be forgiven, you got to do tshuva. How are you doing tshuva? You don't even remember them. He says, al tizkar. Don't remember them. The same way I have forgotten them, I'm asking that you should forget them. Kechastecha, as your kindness. You're kind, the Rebbeinu Shalom. You do chasadim. But so what? Why should the Rebbeinu Shalom do you that chesed? Says David HaMelech, Kechastecha zechar li ata. Remember me now. What David HaMelech, I believe, is saying is, look what I have turned myself into. Look at me now. Zechar li ata. Kechastecha, ata over here is with an aleph, not with an ayin. I don't want to be miscorrect. It doesn't mean remember me now. Zechar li ata. Kechastecha. In accordance with your kindness, Zechar li ata. You should please remember me. It's not ata with an ayin. What David HaMelech is asking is that the Rebbeinu Shalom should remember him in accordance with his kindness. I think he is asking that the Rebbeinu Shalom should remember him in accordance with what he turned himself into. If you look in the Sifrei Musar, if you look in the Ramchal, in the Mesilas Yesharim, where he speaks about tshuva, he talks about the workings of tshuva, the mechanics of tshuva. How does tshuva work? Tshuva works because you get, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you a bracha. He gives you the ability to rectify the things that you've done in the past. But how? The ability that you have is, if you're mitztayer, if you agonize, if you suffer because of things that you did in the past, then that suffering takes the place of the pleasure that you had from the things that you did wrong. The knowledge that you have now, the fact that you strive, that you strove to gain that knowledge, the Torah that you learnt, the fact that you put yourself out to go learn the right way to do things, that can help rectify the ignorance you had when you were young and the things that you did that were wrong that you did out of ignorance. So we can ask the Rebbeinu Shalom, don't remember the things that we did in our youth. Don't remember all the things that we ourselves have forgotten. Don't remember them, because look at us and realize that we're a work in progress, and realize that we are striving and we're making the effort and we're trying to learn drachecha. We're trying to learn your ways. We're trying to turn ourselves into that Tselem Elokim. We're trying to turn ourselves into a person that does live according to the dictates of the Torah HaKadosha. We're trying for Mahu Af Ata. We're trying to become what you want us to be and to follow in your ways. And in the merit of that, we ask, Chatos de'urai upshai al tiskar. Don't remember what we were then. We know that you have the memory of it. We know that there's an indelible impression of it. But we ask that you look aside from it, and you look away from it, and you rather judge us by what we are now. I'm going to stop over here, but I'm going to say right now that I'm going to continue in this capital again next week. Because like I said, even though I keep saying that we're going to try to cover more ground, this is a capital that was always a very special capital to me, and I'm not willing to walk away from it yet. So Mir Hashem will continue with a little bit more on this capital for at least another week. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah, the schus of limud HaTorah, the schus of people coming to learn, to try to know the drachim of Hashem should stand us in good stead. It should stand Gans Klal Yisrael in good stead. The Rebbeinu Shalom should protect everyone. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa to all those in need. And we should be Zaycha together to see the Bias Goyal Tzedek Bebehera V'Yameinu.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's good to see everyone and hear everyone.
Thank you.
Be well.
All the best. All the best. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll see you. Be well.
Yeah. Bye. Okay, thank you.